Shake-ups with the Trump campaign, things to cover locally, and local reaction to some provocative things he's had to say this week.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Greetings, Kimasabe. It's great to have you aboard. Thanks very much for tuning in on this Wednesday evening. We got a lot to cover. We've got two prominent members of our Islamic community who have been here before, who have some things to say in reaction to some of the Cold War revisit commentary by Donald Trump this week. So we'll get right to that ASAP. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go to the rundown and check on some things that are happening. Just wanted to mention these headlines and what's happening now in Warwick. I'm not going to investigate the death of a 6-year-old little one in Warwick at the local beach park. It's something that we're going to have to wait for the authorities to come out with. But I know we have some headlines here, do we not? Yes. You will see that the city of Warwick has decided, based on its depletion of available lifeguards, to close 2 of the 3 facilities. Oakland Beach remains open through the balance of the summer. This comes on the heel of Cranston Mayor Alan Fung doing same with the Budlong Park. And it seems almost that Alan Fung got bailed out by his friend Scott Abedizian. The 2 of them, manage the 2nd and 3rd largest cities in Rhode Island, respectively. And both of them are decent public servants in their own right. I had no axe to grind with either. Fung's got a good whipping from me during the gubernatorial campaign, based on, I think, a lot of what I thought was his incompetence in the campaign. Abedizian's a pretty good soul. I mean, Fung's a good soul too. But here's the thing: it's bad public service. The notion that it's all about lifeguards and college kids. By the way, these college kids aren't going back to school. Not all of them, anyway. This week, they're going to Narragansett to party for a week before they go back to school. You got to find a way to incorporate some kind of new market strategies to incentivize, pay, recruit, do whatever you have to do to get lifeguards at public facilities. This is all part of the lower bar expectation the taxpayers in this state have. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, all right, well, the lifeguards are going home. Oh, yeah, okay, well, what are you going to do? It's just not right. And, make a list for yourself of all the things that you just kind of say, thank you, sir, may have another, when it comes to being disappointed for the return on your taxpayer dollar. This has got to be on that list. In the meantime, good news out of Warwick. The Warwick North Little League is headed to Williamsport. This is the 3rd time in a row that Rhode Island will represent New England at the World Series. That's great stuff. And it is great stuff. And I'm going to admit that I get caught up in it and I watch. But I will say this. I always have a little bit of reservation. National television for kids 10, 11, and 12 years of age seems to me to be a little bit over the top. It's now not just your memory, it's your videotape that you look back on as an adult for your Little League experience for these precious few who are able to advance to this kind of high exposure platform. The sad thing is, when they become 13 and get zits, you know where they are? Nowhere. 13 to 50, yeah, there's another tournament, but nobody pays attention to it. In fact, parents barely get out to watch their kids play when they're 13, 14, 15. But they're cute when they're 10, 11, and 12. Having said that, we wish the North Little League, I'm not going to rail against the whole process. It's way, way gone. But, we wish them all the best, and we hope that they bring home a national and perhaps world championship. They start tomorrow afternoon. We wish them the best of luck. All right, big shakeup in the Trump campaign as we get to the national conversation. Headlines here. Demoted advisor, and by the way, Mr. Manafort's got his own investigative problems when it comes to his consulting business in Ukraine and Russia and all of that. The AP's been on him big time. In the meantime, it's an overhaul of the campaign, it's an addition to the campaign, it's a pivot for the campaign, it's any one of those things. Here's CBS's story.
Donald Trump is shaking up his campaign staff with less than 90 days to go until Election Day. Stephen Bannon, who runs Breitbart.com, now joins the campaign as its CEO, and Kellyanne Conway joins as the new campaign manager. Paul Manafort will remain chairman, but with a diminished role.
And Steve Bannon in particular, he's one of the toughest, most aggressive, most negative operatives in America today. And that signals to me that Trump, rather than softening his approach, is going to double down on being the tough, in-your-face campaigner.
Trump says he doesn't want to soften his approach.
I am who I am. It's me. I don't want to change. Everyone talks about, oh, well, you're going to pivot. I don't want to pivot. I mean, you have to be you.
Hillary Clinton would like to pivot away from any talk about her emails, but some Republicans on Capitol Hill won't let the subject die. Republicans contend Clinton may have perjured herself during congressional testimony at the House Benghazi hearings. They're now comparing notes the FBI handed to Congress Tuesday from its investigation into Clinton's use of a private email server to see if there are discrepancies.
I have nothing to say.
Clinton would not talk about the news during a campaign event in Philadelphia yesterday, but her campaign says it wants the FBI notes made public so Republicans can't selectively leak incomplete information. The FBI warned against that, saying the notes are being provided with the expectation it will not be disseminated or disclosed without FBI concurrence.
It's really something that Hillary's got to do, because here's the irony, right? If this email chain or the thousands of emails that were distributed out of her own server privately weren't dangerous in terms of the classification, then why is the FBI hiding it when it comes to exposure to the committee? You can't have it both ways. And so the FBI is saying, with the CIA recommendation, don't touch. And Hillary's going, oh, no, you can read them all. Well, no, not really. And so all of that aside, though, if no new news comes from what's in that stuff, it's not going to budge this race. And as far as the new campaign team for Donald Trump, it's clear that he is doubling down on who he is, which at least will give you a three-wing circus atmosphere over the next couple of months, no doubt. And of course, he made a lot of news this past week with his revisit to Cold War philosophy, whatever the heck that means.
We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today.
Local reaction, Providence Journal headline here. And the man in the middle, Imam Farid Ansari, returns to the program. He is the Rhode Island Council for Muslim Advancement leader and a friend of the show. Good to have you back, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Your reaction to the Cold War revisit, well, let me ask you this. Can you figure out what that is? Because we had a terrific guest last night, Mark Janest, who is an expert in counterterrorism, and he still can't figure out what it means necessarily.
Well, I think a lot of this rhetoric, no one can figure out what it is, even in terms of making America great again. What does that mean? So he seems to has a knack for ambiguous terms without necessarily defining them.
Without the broad analysis of Donald, which you and I could probably agree on and go all night, did you glean anything specifically from that commentary that affects you and your community?
Yes, and it seems to be a recurring theme in terms of creating this Islamophobia, this fear of Islam, that Islam represents a threat to the United States and to our values, which I firmly disagree with. It's sort of reminiscent of when our first Muslim congressman, Keith Ellison, was elected, and he wanted to be sworn in on the Holy Quran. Well, there was a big hue and cry about him being sworn on the Holy Quran, and only to have drawn from the Library of Congress, the Quran owned by Thomas Jefferson. So, here we have a situation where even one of the founding founders was
Founding fathers. That's like 3 times fast. Let's have a contest. Who can do it better? I'd be with you.
Exactly. So, and he was sworn in on the Quran owned by Thomas Jefferson. So it wasn't like Islam was a stranger to him.
We've got this dynamic with Trump, who kind of stepped in the bucket really early on in this campaign, talking about a temporary stay for Muslims, period, worldwide, coming into this country until we can, quote, figure out what's going on. This is a different, Donald Trump, same approach, light, it seems to me.
Yeah.
Do you see a distinction between the two?
I think his rhetoric is very dangerous. It creates a sort of when it came down to the Jewish community, anti-Semitic rhetoric. I think that's not tolerated, and I don't think this anti-Muslim rhetoric should be tolerated either. America's values, in terms of those values that he spoke about, what about the value of freedom of religion? I mean, that's something that's still particularly here in Rhode Island, it resonates very well here in Rhode Island.
Something specific about his proposal that worries you most? You know, Professor Janest and I last night we were talking about the challenge of actually understanding what it is he wants to do with this extreme vetting, right? Religious questions and the like to be asked. Seems to me if anybody wants to come in and hurt this country, whether Islamic, you know, whether Islam or not, they're not going to be truthful on what it is that they write.
Well, of course not. I don't think so.
Or respond to in terms of questions. Now, extreme vetting has a history, and there's a way to get more intel, no doubt. But you know, religious criteria is generally thought to be off the table.
Well, I mean, even if he had religious advisors, that would even be more reasonable. Like I indicated in this article that was written by the Providence Journal, I'm required as a chaplain in the Bristol County Sheriff's Department to vet those people who are coming in to claiming to represent or be representative or practitioners of Islam. There's a question, there are sincerity questions that I have to ask. Okay. And it's a reasonable request. I mean, you know, to know what is Islam.
So what do you see the difference being?
Well, the difference is he's going to the extreme. I mean, you know, to vet for radical thought or you know, people who show the propensity to violence. Well, absolutely, I would agree with that 100%. As an American, I don't want to see a repeat of 9/11 or any other kind of terrorist action taking place.
So
here.
you have more of a problem with the concept or the specifics? You could get comfortable with the specifics if you saw them, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we as Americans should be concerned with what's happening throughout the world.
We're all
Yeah.
not too happy about this thing called terror. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
All right, hold your thought, if you would, Imam. Just want to let you know real quick that if you're thinking about remodeling your kitchen or your bath, Cumberland Kitchen and Bath Design Center would be a great choice. They were for me. Everything they did was on time and on budget, and don't dismiss the idea that you ought to think about doing that bathroom. Kitchens are always kind of the first play to add value to the house and add value to your quality of life, but how many times you get jammed up in that whole bathroom thinking, you know what, we got to make this bigger or add one. Talk to them. They'll come to your home and visit you, no charge, to talk about what you can do. Cumberland Kitchen Bath Design Center. Stay with us.
They are trying to present ideas that are simplistic, that appeal emotionally, not intellectually. Again, that's not unusual for politicians to do. They are trying to present ideas that are simplistic, that appeal emotionally, not intellectually. Again, that's not unusual for politicians to do. He just does it more so than most politicians. But you know, even when Hillary Clinton comes up, and she has wonderful experience, but most of her speeches appeal to emotion, not logic. And most of her policy pronouncements are broad with tons of holes in them. But she glosses over those because the American people, and more importantly, the media, do not hold them accountable for that. And since she's been around for a long period of time, she's playing by the rules established by politicians in the past, which is broad policy pronouncements, worry about the gaps and the holes later on. You're making
Yet if you pressed her, she could dig in.
She knows the facts. Donald Trump does not.
And that seems to be the distinction, and that may be what Imam, what you were talking about here. Yes?
Yeah, I would say so. He doesn't know the facts about Islam, really, not really.
You know what? Not a lot of people do, period. And that's part of the big conversation that we've always had. Abdelnasser Hussein is the principal of the Islamic School of Rhode Island. Welcome back. Nice to see you again. Getting ready for school?
Getting ready.
Building a high school at this point?
Starting.
That's a big project.
We'll try to go through it.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Similar to every other school that we see mainstream in Rhode Island, right? Same curriculum, all those things.
Public school curriculum.
Important for us to make that point, and I want to talk about this thing called assimilation, because Donald Trump, although we don't have the video right here, made a big point in that speech earlier this week that his policies will demand assimilation. Now, assimilation is kind of an interesting conversation because in Europe, it's one of the challenges I think with the Islamic communities that they've kind of figured out they're going to hang in their own neighborhood, and there's been kind of an isolation thing there, and it may be chicken and the egg as to who's really at fault for that or whether there is a fault there. In America, it's a whole different ballgame, it seems to me. Yes, don't you feel that way?
Feel.
All right.
Exactly.
Talk to me about that.
So I would like to say that I need to connect the idea with the national security, which is if we consider the national security point or consider it in the sense of the safeguarding for the whole country. I would like to say the Muslim minority in the United States are part of this concept, which is the national security. And we need also someone to think about us, to think about how to secure us from any kind of rhetoric, from any kind of attack. And it's not always the idea that we are talking about Muslim communities in the United States as they are strangers. They are coming from a different planet, and we need to make this kind of protection from them. No, we need also to think about the Muslim people in the United States as a part of the community. We need to feel that there is someone, especially if we are talking about homeland security, we are talking about homeland security for everybody. I'm not excluding.
This is the same conversation we had months ago. So on the timeline during this whole campaign, have things gotten better, worse, stayed the same? Tell me.
To me, I think it's getting worse. The best thing to me is getting better is we are close to November.
And this whole thing's going to be over?
Yeah, this is to me, if I'd like to be optimistic, actually, this is the most important thing in my mind right now, with the great hope that Mr. Trump wouldn't reach to that position, or wouldn't come to the office. But the idea really, actually, whenever we are talking and listening from Mr. Trump, he is really thinking about some people need to hear something like this. So he is not just, I think, to my point of view, he is not just talking and telling what he believes in. He is telling what some of our fellow citizens may agree with him. He is always getting the emotions raised against Muslims and against these minority in the country. And when I'm talking about this also, we forgot everything about national security except this part, which is very, very, very little. So where is the economic security? Where is the political security? Where is the environmental security, the energy security? Where is the human security, which we are part of this? Women and the minorities are part of the human security that is needed to really complete the picture of the national security.
Is there a tangible piece of evidence that you can offer that would talk about how this thing has gotten worse, not better, over the course of the campaign?
Well, I think that this recent incident in New York City with the murder of the imam and his assistant, I don't know whether or not the motivation was a hate crime, but let's just say here locally, there was a defamation of the mosque in North Kingstown. Recently at the school, about a year ago at the school, there was some anti-Islamic, graffiti
I always
sprayed
get worried about this. I asked, and so you answered, and the answers are absolutely sufficient. But I always get worried about suggesting that there's a whole big snowball effect going on when one idiot decides to paint the house, or paint the school, or attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But he does.
And we pay a lot of attention to it. We bring credibility to it. It's a horror show, and it's like if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a noise? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, but the thing that worries me is the atmosphere that he's creating, and appealing to these base sentiments, these bias, these prejudices, the hateful speech. I mean, it shouldn't be allowed. Particularly, I mean, it's allowed freedom of speech.
Right.
However, you cannot go into, a movie theater and shout fire because it creates a panic. So this kind of rhetoric creates an atmosphere of fear and people feeling a sense of insecurity, not only as far as the Muslim community is concerned, but in the general public.
When we come back, we'll talk about whether this is going to be a temporary phenomenon, depending on the election results or not. Stay with us. I have to tell you, I've never really counted on Michael Moore for the clear picture either. I must tell you this, the very liberal director and rabble-rouser, no doubt, talented guy. But here's what he's saying now. Trump is self-sabotaging his campaign because he really doesn't want the job in the first place. And then he goes on to say, I really, 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 really know. You got to read this post. I really, 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 really know that he really, really, really doesn't want to be the president, and he kind of caught in a jam. Well, from him, maybe from Michael Moore's lips to your guys and the Lord's ears, right? It is. It's something. Do you think? And again, I mean, this race is still up for grabs. Let's not kid yourself, Raquel. He might be 10 points down on average, or 8, 9, 10 points down on average. And if he doesn't win Florida, he's not going to win this thing anyway. He's down there. But anything could happen. The email thing could show something. There could be some cataclysmic event. Anything could happen in this race. he's starting to even out a little bit. He's starting to slow it down a little bit. Yet you say that the response, the cumulative response, has gotten worse. Two scenarios: he loses. Do you think he gets better for you and your community?
Well,
or is
I
there
would
some
hope
permanent
so.
damage?
I certainly would hope so. I would hope so. It has sort of raised a certain level of consciousness that portrays Islam in a negative light, but it, on the other hand, it has allowed us an opportunity to speak to people concerning the religion.
Okay.
So there's a plus side to it as well.
Your projection?
I think we don't have any other option. If we are thinking that he is out of power and he is talking in that way, what's going to happen if he is really empowered with being in the office? So to me, I don't have any other option. The other option is to wish and push for our community and the people to go for the box for another candidate.
Well, that politics aside, let me ask you this. There's a question that we need 2 hours for, not 2 minutes, and that's all we have left. If I'm the President of the United States now, or the next President of the United States, I bring every Islamic world leader into a summit that says, look, you're either with us or you're not with us, and we need you to get into the game with whatever military resources you have and or rhetorical resources that you have to get into the mind war here to convince most of peace-loving Islam that this other thing is an aberration, it ain't real, and get into the propaganda game so that we don't get beat there. And if you're not in, you're an enemy of the United States of America. Is that appropriate?
I don't think that seems to be a little extreme. I think for most people who know about Islam, who have knowledge of Islam, already know that what we're witnessing, what is being portrayed about Islam, is a complete aberration. And
Yeah, but reportedly the recruiting numbers continue to grow for ISIS.
I don't know.
So that's the concern that I have. Your last thought. We have to have you back on this. I told you it was too big a conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you. They are growing, but the idea here is the followers of ISIS is not mainly coming from the Muslim world or the Middle East. If you go and have a kind of research or study, you will find that the surprise is coming from the West. Many of our young people are joining them. And what's more surprisingly is none of those young men or young ladies are really religiously affiliated. This is one thing we need to take care of. You can't say they have been graduated from Islamic school, they are a religious person attending the mosques. This is the catastrophe here. Those people know nothing about Islam, and this is why they are recruited. At least from my point of
for our
view.
little space and time, it's we just got to have you back to talk about that constantly. But that's a bigger picture issue that I raised, and so we'll have you back soon to talk about it. Guys, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Final
much
word
for
when we come back. Stay with us.
Thank you.
As a former runner, don't laugh. I got a couple county championships under my belt. I hate to see this. This is brutal. Oops, there they go. But what you'd love to see is this, as they help each other and try to get through. One of these qualifiers, one American, or the attempted qualifiers, American and New Zealand, was actually moved up to the championship race. Who was it? Both were. Both were because of the mishap. Good ruling by the Olympic Committee. All right. Seriously, that's happened to me. I had a couple tussles on the track. Can you believe that? You think that's not a contact sport? I got some stories.